Welcome everyone to our second webinar in 2021. I am buzzing with excitement today, and I know I'll try not to make any B references anymore, but I just had to fit this one in because I am really excited about this topic. I do, like probably many people, have a real soft spot for bees. There are two reasons for it. The first one is because I am well aware of the importance of bees. I'm well aware of the amazing things bees are doing. And the second reason is an emotional one, because my parents have had bees for many years and I basically grew up with them. And so, yeah, I just really like them. One reason why I really like them is in the European honeybees in European winter, at least, stay in their hive for the entire time, right? And so what I love to do is put my ear on the hive and hear the buzz, because what they do is they move their wings. I think that's what they do, or they rub. We'll talk about this. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but they are keeping the hive warm inside, and this is just the most amazing sound. It's better than any meditation. Anyway, I would like to begin the webinar by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection with the land, sea, and community. I extend my respect to the elders past and present, and also to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, to begin with, I would like to introduce our fantastic panel today. I'm so excited to have everyone here. We have 5 panelists today, which is fantastic. And I want to introduce our 2 bee experts first. We have Kelly Lees. Hi, Kelly. So nice to have you.
Hi, Heike. Thanks for having me.
So Kelly is the current Education Officer Honeybees for the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries. This is, by the way, the best job title I've heard in a very long time. I would love to have that, so I'm impressed. She is also the co-owner of a small commercial beekeeping business in Newcastle. And as a former high school teacher and self-professed bee nerd, she loves nothing more than talking about bees with people who want to hear about it. Well, perfect setting, isn't it? Our second expert is Justine. Hi, Justine. Nice to have you.
Hi, guys.
Hi, who is a community-focused beekeeper, and she's done that for roughly 14 years. Justine has roughly 50 European honeybee hives, and they are spread across her local community in the south of Sydney, which I think is amazing. So a lot of people in her area have her beehives in their backyard, which I think is a really great approach. She is also a very passionate meat maker. So if you have not tried this delicious honey liquor, you should. It's the best. And she is selling this at local farmers markets in the Illawarra and the Sutherland Shire. And I know that she's starting to win a lot of awards now with her delicious meat. So yeah, look her up on Facebook. We also have Vanessa Ryan-Rendall, who is an experienced primary school teacher, education consultant, and librarian. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone.
She has written a fantastic book, which is called Bee Detectives. We'll talk about this later. And she's very keen in engaging students in literature while learning more about the natural world. So I guess you combined your 2 passions when you wrote this book. And she loves helping children build skills, investigating, problem solving, and creative thinking. And we also have our 2 education experts here. We have Claudia Brewin and Emilia Borrillo. They are both from Nido Early School in South Australia. Claudia is the curriculum leader, and for her, the importance of early childhood is what really drives her passion for her job. Her pedagogical practices align with the educator as a facilitator of learning, just like Little Scientist does. In her educational leader role, she focuses on providing mentoring, innovation, and inspiration to all educators, which supports their curriculum decisions and practices, a really important role. And Emilia is the early childhood teacher at Nido Learning School, and her passion for education is supporting young children to be lifelong learners. She understands that children need to be provided with rich learning environments that foster their individual learning journey. And she is inspired by the Reggio Emilia approach, which means that she very much knows that children are capable and competent learners and individuals. So welcome everyone, let's get started. After this little delay, we cannot wait any longer. Let's start with Justine and Kelly. What is the most fascinating thing about bees for you two?
Oh, that's a hard question, Heike. There's so many things that fascinate me about bees, but one of the things that I really love is the way that they communicate. So, you know, the dances that they do, the waggle dance and the round and round dance and all those dances that they do inside the hive. And it's dark inside the hive, so they're communicating by touch and feel and by smell. So that is really super complex communication system. So I love that about them. I could go into great detail, and I can later if you like. I also, you know, you mentioned that they stay inside in those European winters, and they do, and they don't go to the toilet, which I find so interesting. They're locked in there for months and they don't defecate, and then when there's a sunny day they come out and they go to the toilet. So, you know, there's so many things that are fascinating about them, the way that they build the wax. You know, we were talking about fun facts earlier, and bees secrete these tiny little flakes of wax from their wax glands underneath their abdomen, and it takes nearly 916,000 wax scales to make 1 kilo of beeswax. So, you know, they're really, really hard workers.
This is already probably one of the most important facts for the entire webinar, just being aware of how much work it is to produce 1 teaspoonful of honey. So the next time we empty a honey glass, we'll make sure it is really, really empty before we throw the jar in the recycling.
Yeah, it'll take 7 bees their whole lifetime to make 1 teaspoon. So, you know, they work incredibly hard.
Yes. Justine, what fascinates you most about bees?
I think because I'm at the, I do a lot of markets and I get to see a lot of people that love honey and they love bees and they always want to, you know, tell me all about their bees and whatever. I think for me, the first question I say to everybody, because my little side thing that I do, I showed everyone before. Can I show you that again? So I put my bees that I find dead in my resin. And so I make little jewelry out of it all. And so I'm always wearing it up, make earrings and rah, rah, rah. And the first comment a lot of people say is, I thought we were supposed to be saving bees, not killing bees. And I say to them, well, you do know that bees roughly live for about 6 weeks. And they go, oh, no, we didn't know that. So for me, that's not a fun fact, but it's the fact that I guess most people don't realize that for their short little life, they do so much important work. So for me, that's always fascinated me, that they get to do so much, and it kind of makes me think about what I'm doing and what more could I do in my longer life. But you know, if they achieve so much in 6 weeks, what do I achieve in 56 years? Or do you know what I mean? Like that's my
it's interesting that you say that, because I interviewed my mom about what she knows about bees as part of this webinar, and it's what she said is related to that. She said, I am just blown away by how peacefully these roughly 30,000 bees live together, and that they, you know, they are so incredibly efficient, and they coexist in a way that humans would never be able to coexist. So I think you're right. It's inspiring, you know, to think how much does one little bee learn in their lifetime, and also how do they manage to be so productive and peaceful at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the only other really quickly one is that I find fascinating is that because I place my hives, I'm a suburban beekeeper. I place my hives in everyone's front yards, backyards, carport roofs, wherever I can fit one hive. I don't put 2 or 3, basically, because one beehive, like I've had one at Bella's place, that one beehive can roughly pollinate, you know, up to sort of a 10K radius. So, you know, having one beehive in each location, then they get to, you know, then you get to eat your local raw honey, which I find that's fascinating, you know, that a bee can fly up to 5 kilometres a day, roughly 2 or 3 kilometres is what they generally do, pollinating anything that comes across them, not just one particular type of, you know, they don't just do their cherry blossoms, or they don't just do their wattle, or they don't just do their lavender, they do everything, so that whatever they carry back on their hairy legs or whatever pollen's in their mouth, that goes into the cell. So it's across species in suburbia. Come bush is different, but in suburbia they're collecting everything, and I think that's what fascinates me.
Kelly, maybe can you tell us a little bit about, let's say, the career of a bee, because we just touched on that. So we can talk about honeybees, but we can also talk about native bees. You pick, but what do they do in their short life?
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about honeybees, because the native bees are so different across the species about what they do. Some live solitary, some are semi-social, some live in colonies. But in terms of honeybees, the jobs that they do are age-related. So as they develop, honeybees have lots of different glands in their bodies, and so their jobs that they have are age-related to that glandular development in their actual physiology. So what happens is the first job is after they hatch, they clean. So they do the job of cleaning out the cells ready for the queen to come along and lay another egg in there. So they're essentially like janitors when they first start. And then they start feeding what we call the brood, which is the baby bee. So they produce this special food from a gland in their head, and this is brood food, and they feed that to the larva. And the larva can be fed up to 9 times a minute. So you're talking about intensive feeding, because the larvae only get fed for a short period of time, 4 to 5 days when they're uncapped, before they go on their pupal journey to becoming an adult bee. And so they have to get lots of food in that short period of time. So they're super busy feeding them. And then they move on to other jobs like looking after the brood in terms of keeping it warm. So they have to keep the hive at 35 degrees inside the brood nest. So they do jobs like generate heat. Some bees will go out and bring water back and lick that onto the brood to cool it down. So they do those sorts of jobs. And then they might look after the queen. So the queen has a retinue, and that retinue feed her and groom her and touch her with their antennae and pass her smell around the hive. And so that then the bees know, oh, yeah, we've got a queen, everyone's good. So they do all sort of inside jobs first, and that takes up the majority of their life. Then they might do jobs like guard the hive. So they can sting and guard the hive, making sure no intruders get in. And then in the last couple of weeks of their life, they do the outside jobs, the jobs we see. So they go collect pollen, they go collect water, they go collect nectar to turn it into honey, and they also collect propolis as well, which is that resinous substance that trees produce that they use. It's like glue, we call it bee glue. So they use that inside the hive, and it's got lots of antibacterial properties. So the jobs that we see, if you're not opening a beehive, are those last couple of weeks of their very short 6-week life. So yeah, they do this real sort of graduated series of jobs both in and outside of the hive.
Well, there's so many questions already. I know we only have limited time. That's why we will provide some interesting literature to all of you later, so you can really, start reading and learning more about bees. But maybe we can briefly, Justine and Kelly, talk about the queen. How is the queen selected? Do we know that? What's the job of the queen? Just tell her a few fun facts about that.
I can't talk to that about. I always find it hard trying to find her every time. So every sort of 12 to 18 months, and I don't paint my queens. So every sort of 18 months, I requeen my hives, and that's always a game that Dad and I get to play together. You know, who can find the queen first? So it's yours.
So, did you want me to talk about how they make a queen?
Yes, please. Yeah. So maybe in a few minutes. I don't know. We don't have that much time.
No, I can do it really quick. So
yes, please. Yeah.
The queen can lay two kinds of eggs: a fertilized egg and an unfertilized egg. Okay. Fertilized eggs become worker bees or queens. Unfertilized eggs become drones, the male bees. So what happens is the workers build cells. Queen comes along, sticks her head in, empty cell, measures it. If it's a small cell, she'll turn around and she'll lay a fertilized egg. Then the workers choose. So they decide we need a new queen. And so that egg, when it hatches into a larva, that fertilized egg gets fed royal jelly. So instead of getting bee bread, which is a mixture of fermented pollen and nectar, which is what the workers and drones get fed, that larva only gets fed royal jelly, which is a special milky substance with 200 plus components in it that turns that larva into a queen. So the workers actually choose which larva is going to be a queen. The queen just lays eggs, so she's not really in charge. The workers do all of that.
So not to get into the details more, but do I understand correctly that we don't know why this one particular larva is picked to be the queen?
No, we think they're just selecting the optimum age larva. So it's got to be less than 24 hours old once it's hatched as an egg, from an egg. Yeah.
Fascinating. So if you weren't hooked before, then I think you're now. I have a good feeling because I think it's just so fascinating to learn about them. Now I have a short video which I would like to share with you, and then we continue talking.
Human society is extremely complex and fragile, built upon various pillars. One of them is the honeybee. 1 out of 3 meals eaten by humans is made possible by honeybees. They are so important that if all the honeybees were to die out, thousands of plants would follow, which could lead to millions of people starving in the following years. On top of that, honeybees have a huge economic impact. The dollar value of plants pollinated by them each year is around $265 billion. Food we take for granted would just stop existing without them, or there would be a massive decrease in productivity. Food including apples, onions, pumpkins, and also plants used for feeding livestock, and thus extremely important for our milk and meat. Einstein is often quoted as having said, "If honeybees die out, humans will follow a few years later." Actually, he probably didn't say that, but there might be some truth in the statement. It's unsettling, but honeybees have started to disappear. Millions of hives have died in the last few years. Beekeepers all over the world have seen an annual loss of 30 to 90% of their colonies. In the US alone, bees are steadily declining, from 5 million hives in 1988 to 2.5 million today. Since 2006, a phenomenon called colony collapse disorder has affected honeybees in many countries, and we're not entirely sure what's causing it. All we know is that it's pretty serious.
Okay, well, this is not a very uplifting video, but very important to talk about it. Just a side note, everyone, you will be sent the link because this is a longer video, so you can continue watching it later. Now, this is portraying the situation for bees on an international scale. Now, I would like to talk about the Australian situation now. Kelly, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the situation of bees in Australia.
Sure. Yeah. So the video is talking about the loss of honeybee colonies, primarily overseas. So in Australia, we haven't really seen a decline in the number of hives. we have seen a decline in the number of beekeepers, although that is turning around. So the bee population in Australia is pretty healthy and pretty stable. One of the main things is we don't have varroa mite as yet, a tiny little parasite of honeybees, which the video briefly mentioned colony collapse disorder, and that has been implicated as being involved in colony collapse. But at the moment in Australia, we're in a pretty good position. We do have some diseases, but they're fairly manageable at this stage. But if varroa comes, we might be in a different situation. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be aware. What we need to do is actually look at the lessons from overseas and make sure that we don't make the same mistakes, that we're prepared if, you know, varroa comes, so that we can keep our honeybee population healthy.
Yeah, so we're right in this, the most important question, I would say. Justine, what can we do?
So I guess one of Kelly's other partners or bosses or someone that works parallel Kelly at the DPI. So I have a dozen hives that DPI maintained, that I maintain for the DPI, Department of Primary Industry, down here at Port Kembla and at Port Botany. So they're using our hives as sentinel hives, as possibly and hopefully the first one call around. Generally, as the container ships travel around the world, picking up cargo, whatever, bees are opportunists, and they will find the most comfortable, cozy little place out of the wind to build a new hive. And a lot of the time, not a lot of the times, but most of the times they'll find a nice a container shipment. And a lot of containers that end up in port will stay in port for, I don't know, I'm sure there's probably factual information on that, but they'll be anywhere between sort of 2 and 3 months, sometimes 6 months at any port. And that container will get picked up, will get reloaded onto another ship, and it will go anywhere from China, Africa, all the way around the world and end up in Sydney. And so our sentinel hives, as part of the, I'm sure there's probably a proper technical term for it all. Basically, that if the bees leave that container, that they'll hit my hives first. So every 6 to 8 weeks, I work with Mark Page. I don't know if you know Mark at all. Yep. So I haven't worked since COVID. I haven't been part of it all because of the restrictions of entering into the ports and whatnot. But those 6 hives down at Port Kembla and the other 6 hives at Port Botany were their sacrificial hives. So, you know, and every 6 to 8 weeks we would do a sample, a test strip, a bee collection, and then they get sent off to the laboratories to get tested. So, you know, in the last years we've been part of all of this. Maybe not that long, maybe more, maybe, well, it doesn't matter. You know, touch wood, we haven't seen anything.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you have there are lots of procedures in place to protect Australia. Now let's start talking about children, because that is obviously our main topic. So what should children know about bees so that they can treat them with the respect that they deserve? Kelly, maybe you have a tip for us there.
Yeah, look, I think it's really important that kids know how important bees are to our food supply. You know, that 1 in 3 bites that those kids are taking is pollinated by honeybees. And as that video said, you know, some of the things people don't think about, like, you know, if you eat meat, a lot of your pasture crops and things that are fed to beef and dairy cattle are also pollinated by honeybees. So bees are this super important integral part of our food system. And I think the biggest thing that we can teach kids is where our food comes from and how it gets on our plate. You know, it just doesn't appear in a can in the supermarket. You know, how did it get there? What was its journey? Someone had to, you know, grow that food. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they understand our food system and how integral bees are to that.
Yes. And how hard bees work, for example, right? Again, we're coming back to the beginning to produce a little bit of honey. Before we move on to Vanessa and her book, last question for Kelly and Justine. What would you say is your most important do and your most important don't when it comes to handling bees or encountering bees, maybe ideally from a child's perspective. So what should a child never do and what should they always do?
Oh, maybe so it's okay, you can hear me. So
Yes.
I guess when putting my hives in people's homes, the first thing I say to, they've always got kids, and it's generally the main reason why most parents or most of my customers put a hive at their place and they become custodians of my hives. That I always say to there's a few things you guys have got to remember. When you're walking past the hive, no loud noises. Second thing is, if you're really concerned, put your hands under your armpits, because Kelly can probably say more scientific reasons, is that from what I understand, our sweat glands are in the palms of our hands, and bees have a really super sensitive noses, and they can smell us, and they can, I don't know whether, I always say to the kids they can smell fear. So I mean, that's just my way of making the kids appreciate the hive, that there's a hive at their place. And if they do actually get stung, not to take the stinger out, because that little sac that's at the end is full of venom. And instead of picking it out with your fingers, where you actually end up squeezing the venom back into them, you actually scratch it out like you're scratching, like you're scratching. And then I say to everybody, and squeeze that affected area like you're squeezing out a blackhead. And everyone goes, ooh. And then basically just wipe it and stay calm. I say to a lot of people, if you're going to have a hive, have a little atomizer. I should have probably brought it with me. It's just a little tiny little sort of atomizer that I got from the $2 shop, and it's full of bleach. And once again, it's just that sort of acid alkaline thing. What I understand, I'm probably got it all wrong, but is it by spraying the affected area where the bee's been stung, where you've been stung by a bee, it just tends to take that burning sensation away. It's an old bushies trick. When we first started being beekeepers, that's what they all said to us to do. So I'm not telling you to pour bleach all over your hand, but just a tiny little puff of bleach just tends to take that burning sensation away. So I always say to everybody that those three things: no loud noises, and stay calm. And if you do get stung by a bee, if you panic, then where the venom's gone in under the epidermal layer of the skin is where your adrenaline lies. And it's by panicking that you actually puff up more. So if you can take a big deep breath, and then then walk to mum and go, Mum, I've been stung by a bee. Yeah. Then we can do something about it.
Okay, so. Thank you. That's great.
Was that about right, Kelly?
Well, I don't know about the bleach. I wouldn't recommend that for kids.
It works.
Yeah, look, I'd say more warm soapy water or dilute vinegar. You just got to wash the venom off the skin.
Yeah.
Look, the thing I'd say to kids is don't be afraid. Okay, bees don't chase you. All right, unless you're wearing really stinky cologne or stinky washing powder or something like that. Bees are very focused on their jobs. You can go surprisingly close to them. Kids are going to encounter them in the garden. You can get up close and watch them. The one I would say is don't try to catch them or touch them. Yeah, they're not too keen on that. But otherwise, you can get up close and observe them. Just you don't need to be afraid of them. They're very, very focused on their jobs. Even when they're in a hive, you can get quite close and have a look at them and see what they're doing. They mainly ignore us. So
that's right, because I mean they only sting once, right? We have to remember that. Yeah. They will die if they sting.
Bees know that. Bees know that if they sting you, they're going to die. They're not, they're pretty intelligent little creatures. I remember just seeing something a little while ago where they were saying that a lot of bees, they'll actually recognise people after a while, and they know your scent. So when I turn up to one of my backyards to harvest some honey, they generally always come out and have a look at and look and see and see me. They generally know the owners of the hive more than they know me, because they see them all day long. So I always thought there's a lot of fascinating things about these little girls.
Fantastic.
can I say one thing that I always think is fascinating when I tell the kids? That every bee that we see is generally a female bee. That, once again, Kelly, I probably got it all wrong, but this is how I've kind of told the story, is that it's kind of a total role reversal. That most of the bees that we get to see are females. They collect the pollen and they collect the nectar and they bring it back to the hives. And the drones, the boy bees, only leave the hives twice a year to procreate and to find a hive. See what I mean? So this is how these things, I'm actually learning a lot myself too. You know, there's a lot of things that I've been telling the story all backwards. So I know you nurse bees and then you field bees and then you drone your protector bees. I got my order all wrong. So thank you, Kelly. I've actually learned a real lot too. So
okay. Well, let's move on. I know there's so much to talk about, but I'm just mindful of the time. I would like to give our other three panelists a bit of a platform as well. So thank you so much, Kelly and Justine. Please jump in later if there's anything that you want to, comment on later. But for now, hi, Vanessa. I would like to talk to you about your book.
Hi. Yes.
I'm going to show it to everyone again. This is Vanessa's book, Bee Detectives. Vanessa, do you want to tell us what inspired you to write this book?
It's probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we bought our own stingless beehive, just because I'd been reading about how great they were for pollination, and that you could have one in your backyard with kids around, not worrying about the stings. So we bought our hive, and I discovered, as being a primary school teacher and working in a library as well, that there weren't really any children's books about stingless bees. So that's just where I started to write some different various manuscripts, and eventually came up with this one and pitched it to CSIRO. So
yeah.
And as I learnt more, I realised that I didn't know anything about stingless bees, because I suppose we just know a lot about the honeybee. That's what we talk about the most, because stingless bees do look like little flies. If you don't know what they are, you'll think they're tiny other little bugs. So I learnt so much. So but I thought it was really important for children to be able to know about these bees and know that there's lots of different types of bees in Australia.
Can you give us a very short summary of the book?
So it's about two children who notice that a tree's fallen down, and there's a stingless beehive in distress because it was leaving in the hollow of the tree. And from there, they call some bee scientists who come and rescue the hive, and they put it into a hive box, which a lot of people have in urban areas. A lot of preschools have them, a lot of schools have them. So then those two children learn about the hive box and also the hive, how it's set up. And then from there, they become bee detectives. So then they learn about the solitary bees. So the hive box has the social bees, and then they go into learn about a few different solitary bees that are in our garden. So like the blue-banded bee and the teddy bear bee. So yeah, that's the sort of the storyline. And the book itself lends itself to young children. So you could even read it. I've had parents read it to 3-year-olds, and it can go all the way up to 12-year-olds, and you could use it in high school as well. But even though there's a lot of words, because the CSIRO picture books are a lot longer, because we've got a lot of science within that, and got technical language and more explanation, because the illustrations are so fantastic. I've read it to 3 to 4-year-olds in a preschool room, and I read the first few pages, and then we just went through the book and spoke about pictures, because there's diagrams, and then we looked at photos, and so it's a great book for all ages, and it's fun. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I just said this to you earlier, right? The really appealing thing about this book is that it works for so many age groups, and I would say even for adults. I really enjoyed reading it. I learned a lot that I didn't know before about native bees. But for very young children, like my daughter, for example, she's only 13 months, but she kept pulling it out of the drawer. It was in.
Oh, great.
I kept saying to her, "Don't do it, Lottie. I need it." You know.
Yeah, yeah.
We can't have baby things like all over the book. But she was really drawn to it because of the beautiful images. So yeah, it's so definitely if you have not heard about it, everyone, this is currently available on the CSIRO website. And we'll make sure that it's in our links or in our resources for after the webinar. Kelly, do you want to tell us, speaking of children and bees, what is it like if a center wanted to implement bees more into the children's everyday life, for example, get a hive? What would you recommend the center to do?
So I would say, yeah, definitely get stingless bees, just in terms of childcare centres. I mean, brave childcare centre to get a honeybee hive. So yeah, I definitely recommend that they get stingless bees. Now they can be a little bit hard to come by because they're difficult to propagate. They take a long time to make, but there are a number of places around that if you look on the internet you'll find there's an organisation in Sydney that sells them, Sydney stingless bees, and there's some in Queensland as well. What I would say to people is if they want to source stingless bees, make sure you get them from as local as possible, because there are a number of different species that are specific to areas. There's 3 that live in colonies that are stingless bees, and they are localised in different parts of Australia. So do make sure that you get the species that's local for your area and get them as from close as possible, because then they're climatically adapted to your region.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Justine.
I just put my hand up really quickly. Is that my dad's got 3 colonies, 3 native Aussie bees. I don't know which specific species they are, but he's had them there for nearly 8 years. And every 2 years he will split them. So we've been handing them out over the years to friends. So I'll give Bella the contact so that you can actually talk to my dad.
So that would be for a centre in Illawarra or
anywhere in Sutherland Shire, or look, I've brought 2. They're about the size of a shoebox, yeah, and I've had 2 down here in Bulli, and both within by midway through winter. I mean they're buttoned off anyway because they button off around 18 degrees. They by spring when everything else is sort of working and it's nice warm weather, and they've gone. So I just don't know that they were the right species for down here in the Illawarra. And I know there's a tree above Thrill train station that's got a native beehive there that's been there for years.
Okay, so
if someone in Sutherland Shire mascot area, I can pretty much help people.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we'll that's a shout out for people down there. So let us know if you are interested. Just contact us, and then we can talk to Justine. Vanessa, I was just wondering, maybe one last thing. What feedback from children and adults would make you happiest about your book?
I think just that they're more aware of the different types of bees out there. So like you said before, you've learned a bit from the book. There's a lot of friends that have bought my book and parents that have said they never knew that stingless bees existed.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, that now people are suddenly realizing that there are a lot of centres have stingless bees, or even schools like where my children go to school now, there's parents that actually know what that hive is and that they're not bugs swarming, that they're actually stingless bees. And then even the blue banded bee, for example, that features in the book, and now people know that they exist and they know to look for them. So I think that's probably the main takeaway that that I'm enjoying, that there's just that awareness, and then that we know that there's more reason to look after the world and put more flowers and trees and plants in, because then we get more bees and everything.
It's right. It's like bees really are a fantastic starting point for making children aware of environmental protection and just mindfulness when it comes to the environment, right? Because they are so important, and they also are just so fascinating and cute and everything that children like. So it's a really great starting point. Kelly, you just left us a message here. You said you could comment on native bees and where to get them.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that I could type in the chat the 3 species that you can keep in colonies and whereabouts on the coast you can keep them. If you'd like.
Please. Yes, please. That would be great. And we will also later on share this with everyone. So if you can't see the chat comment from Kelly right now, that's not a problem, because we will share this with all of you later. Okay, let's talk.
I was going to add really quickly, what I don't do is don't ever feed bees honey. If you see, I know there was a big thing going around social media, and I was kind of cringe factor about it all, that everyone was telling everybody to leave a teaspoon of honey out. If you see a bee, feed it honey. Well, it just makes them gastric, and it doesn't, they just need water. If you see a bee that's landed on the ground somewhere, she's tired, or she's just having a rest. So if you want to give her a bit of a water source, no deeper than 2 millimeters, or she'll drown. So don't feed bees honey. That
is a really, thank you, Justine, for mentioning this. This is really important that you say that we can help bees by, for example, putting little vessels of water everywhere in our center, because they, especially in summer, they get thirsty, right? Because like you said, they fly very long distances. So that's a really good one. Also, another one for our center would be, do you call them bee meadows? So a bee-friendly yard. There is lots of information out there, which we'll share with you as well. So how can you make your center's garden, your center's yard as bee-friendly as possible? So
I was walking, my husband does a lot of fishing along the Thredbo River, and one day I was walking along, I get bored really quickly, so on the edge of the river, and all these little bees were on the edge of the water, standing on the sand, sucking water through the wet sand. So they don't need a puddle of water. So I say to all my custodians in my hives, get a container, get an old plate, an old bird bath, but fill it with sand, coarse sand, and then fill it with water.
Oh, good idea.
Bees can land on the wet sand and drink off the wet sand.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
That's probably the best one to do, rather than fill a container up with water. Yeah. They all swim. When you walk along the edge of the water on a hot summer's day, you see all the dead bees floating on, on the edge of the sand. It's because they drown. So wet sand is good.
Great.
I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure stingless bees you don't put water out for them. Yeah, Kelly, so they don't need water.
Do you want to wrap this up by telling us maybe one other tip for children and educators in terms of helping bees in the environment, and commenting on Vanessa's statement right now?
Yep. So putting water out is good. Stingless bees their honey is much runnier. So she's right, they don't drink water in the same way that honeybees do, because their honey has a very high water content, unlike European honeybee honey. Look, plant bee food. That would be my one thing. If you're gonna, get kids in the soil, get them planting plants, a whole range of things, and think about what I call successional planting. So think about your seasons and something that's flowering at every time of year. And bees see in the UV colour spectrum, so they are particularly attracted to blue and purple and white flowers. Doesn't mean they don't go to yellow and red. Some of those things under UV light actually have purple spots on them that bees can see that we can't see. But plant lots of bee food. No bee deserts. I don't want to see a garden full of pebbles and non-flowering succulents. Let's get lots of plants in there for bees.
Great, there we go. You all go out and buy some seeds and plant some plants. There we go, we got it. All right, let's talk about a practical example from a center setting. We have Claudia and Emilia from South Australia who actually won our Little Scientist STEM Award last year for this particular project. So let's talk to them about it. Emilia was the educator or the teacher, who was heavily involved in it, who did the project. So Emilia, do you want to tell us a little bit about this project? How did it start?
Sure.
For example, let's start there. How did the project start?
So it was an in-depth research project into the nature of bees. So the children inquired into all aspects of the insect, from autonomy to exploring the fauna bees live in. Our inquiry-based experiences were related to the STEM concepts. So to begin with, the children noticed bees buzzing around our beautiful crepe myrtle tree located in the outdoor environment. So the children returned to this daily, which sparked their curiosity of how do bees make honey. So to begin with, our journey started with children wanting to inquire further. They initially had limited knowledge in the beginning, other than they produced honey and had a stinger. So as educators, our role was to critically reflect on the learning opportunities that occur and the exploration of bees that promoted and how they help our environment, and also contributing to food sources was the main focus. Once we did this improved learning outcomes for children as they develop awareness of the importance the bees play in our environment and the processes involved to make honey. The children use technology such as iPads, microscopes, traditional literacy such as books to support and extend their learning and ideas.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say, Emilia, what were the biggest hurdles and the biggest problems that the children encountered during this project?
We had reflective moments as a group and as a whole, also individually, where we encountered a barrier when a child got stung by a bee. It was at this point in the project where it had taken a turn, and some children were anxious to get up close and to explore the bees.
So can I ask that? So that's not how the project started. They were interested in bees. They started the project, and then in the process, some children were stung. Okay.
Yeah. So it was towards the end of our project when a child did get stung by a bee, and that's when it had taken that turn. So it's at this point we educated the children about risky play, how bees can feel threatened that time. But seeing this as an opportunity for learning, to research alongside the child and intentionally teach the children about bee stings, but also what happens to the bee once they sting. So losing their stinger is important. Another hurdle that we had faced was, or a roadblock during the global pandemic. We had no longer been able to connect with an expert beekeeper. We had planned for this, for a beekeeper to visit our service with the intention that the children would be able to interact and see a live beehive, where the expert was going to share information about bees, how they pollinate and their purpose within the natural environment, and ways that we can help within our community. So this was a missed opportunity for learning for the children, where they could have their questions answered from an expert. So as educators, we still wonder what questions the children would have posed from this experience.
Can I ask Kelly, actually, in a situation like this, what could educators do? So if they can't get an expert into the center, is there anything that you could think of that they could do instead?
They could do this. You know, they could get a beekeeper on Zoom, or yeah, that would be my recommendation, is still get that interaction so the kids can actually, you know, see someone's face and talk to them. I mean, it's challenging because it's so fun to take live bees into daycares. I've done it before, and you know, kids really love that and they really interact with that on-screen presence. But you know, that presence, we all sort of had those hurdles in COVID, and I think that, you know, definitely just get someone on. You know, they can still get their gear and show smokers, and they can have live bees. It's just that and the kids aren't there with the bees. But, you could get someone opening a hive and talking to the kids, if you can get someone that's sort of tech savvy.
Is that something that you would do if someone wanted to book you?
Yeah, we do that sort of thing. So,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, then everyone out there, I think Kelly will be very busy, for the rest of the year. If you need an expert, there she is. So if
Did I send you that video? Did I send you the video of me going into one of the hives?
You have not, but you were going to.
Okay, I'll do it now.
So this is maybe also something that we can share. Just saying, we'll do that later. So I'll be in touch with you. You can send this video to me, and then we'll share this with everyone. Okay, back to Emilia and Claudia. Last question for you, Emilia. What was your role?
My role in the project, I viewed myself as a facilitator of learning during the inquiry-based project, where I would support, model and scaffold the children to be confident and capable young citizens as they delve deeper into their inquiries and wonderings. It is a topic of fear sometimes, so how can we challenge that, that notion of not having that fear around bees, but exploring them through our environment and our community in the world we live in. So just even having that, where we had a barrier where we encountered along our journey of the bee sting, but reflecting on this as a learning opportunity was my role, and how not everything does go to plan, but how can we facilitate the project to enhance the children's learning?
Now, how did you, actually there is one more question, how did you deal with the fear the children developed after one of them got stung?
It was more about their risky play, so giving them time to still go back and explore our bees within our environment, and teaching them about the importance of being able to still go up close, observe, and it was evident after that, where that notion of where they were quite afraid to go up close, you could see along the project after that the respect they had for the bees within their environment.
Mm-hmm. Right, this is a good segue to talk to Claudia, because I know that for you, risky play and safety obviously have to, be in balance. How do you do this at your center, Claudia?
Well, there is no one answer for this. There are multiple ways in which, educators can foster children's exploration while still keeping them safe. There's a growing awareness that children want and need to have challenging play experiences that involve a degree of risk. Therefore, we provide environments that allow children to assess and take risks. We hear educators, we're not risk adverse. It does start with our image of the child. We have a strong view of children as capable and competent learners who have the potential to wonder and then from that pursue curiosity and inquiry. I think as well, one way we balance this is through critically reflecting in the moment about which learning opportunities might be acceptable or desirable because of their benefits to children, allowing the children the greater autonomy to explore and take considered risks, while ensuring experiences are age appropriate. According to Albert Bandura's social learning theory, children learn from observations of people around them. Therefore, modelling risk-taking in a growth mindset is important while children are taking considered risks. There are good and bad risks, are acceptable and hold good risks are acceptable and hold few surprises, whereas bad risks offer no obvious learning or development benefits to children. Children do need to encounter some risks if they are to respond positively to challenging situations and learn how to deal with uncertainty. Therefore, providers of play opportunities have no choice but to offer situations in which children can experience hazards. In summary, exercising the words as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And we talk about this a lot in our workshops as well. Like you said, it really depends also on our role. That we obviously, we are there to support the children, but we're there to demonstrate, right? It's very important when you, for example, use a tool that you haven't used before, or when you are encountering animals that the children don't know anything about, that there is an adult present that can support them and gives them the information that they need to be safe. And that's why a lot of the things we talked about today are really important, right? To, for example, for children to understand that bees die when they sting and that they would never risk their life if it weren't really necessary. And we also understood what dangers are, like when does a bee feel threatened? What can children do to not make them threatened so that they can minimize the risk of being stung? So yeah, that's great. Claudia, in your opinion, how can we teach children respect for animals in general, for animals and the environment? How do you guys doing this at your center?
Well, again, in my personal philosophy, I consider animals to be integral to early learning and consider them to be the fourth teacher. Just as Nido Early School does, this is an extension to our Reggio Emilia approach to early education. But one of the most important and easy starts to spark children's intrigue in the topic of animals is through real life interactions. Venturing outside often, allowing children to observe and share their discoveries of wildlife, encouraging questions and conversations, asking children provocative questions that foster their imagination. For example, what's it like to be that bee? Instilling respect for all animals is also important. It's easy for children to respect the cute, cuddly animals such as cats, dogs, and hamsters. But what about those creepy, crawly critters or bizarre bugs such as bees? We can educate the children about habitats and why each animal, big or small, is important. We can role model a respectful relationship between humans and animals by allowing children to observe them in their natural environments, encouraging children to be inquisitive about bugs and animals without disturbing them.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
By allowing children the opportunity to engage with animals in a variety of ways, we provide them with a feeling of authentic value in their learning and the tools for developing respect for their environment and cultivate a love for creatures great and small.
Yeah, exactly. And that means that we let them explore. Like, again, I think of my daughter, right? She is extremely fascinated with everything around her. She's immersed, and there's nothing better, but I still am responsible for her, for teaching her how to interact with other creatures and the environment around her. So it's a balance, again, between letting them explore and giving them the information that they need to show respectful behavior for the environment. Okay, that's fantastic. Guys, we're actually at the end. We only have a couple minutes left, but we also have a couple questions that I would like to pose first. And I do feel like they are probably for our experts, Justine and Kelly. So let me read them to you and then you jump in. Can you suggest any hands-on tips for children and adults to help encourage bee population and conservation? These can be a mix of simple everyday things and long-term behavioral changes.
Yep, I'll jump in. So I would say, I'll just reiterate what I said before, is plant lots of bee food. So, get your kids and grown-ups out in the garden. Even if you live in an apartment, there's no reason you can't have something on your balcony for bees to feed on and other wildlife. And the other thing I'd say is, when you get your honey, buy it from a local beekeeper. Wherever you live, support your local beekeeper, because what you're doing then is supporting your local bee populations and also your local economy. So, and you're also getting honey usually that hasn't been heat treated or microfiltered. So you're getting the best nutritional honey around if you buy it locally.
Fantastic, thank you, Kelly. And the last question, how can we introduce to children the importance of bees to our food system? And introducing this cycle, any starting tips? Kelly, maybe you want to jump into that as well?
Yeah, I'm thinking about how you could do it simply. I think you could start by, just something that just popped into my head just then was you could go buy a whole range of fruit and vegetables, and put it all on a plate and discuss, has it been pollinated by bees? Because in that video, you might have noticed, it talked about things like carrots and onions. A lot of people don't know that those things, which most people eat every day, are actually 100% reliant on honeybees for the pollination of seeds. for the next generation of carrots and onions. So, you know, lots of people know about things like blueberries and watermelons, you know, all the delicious things that we like to eat in summer, but there's a whole range of other things. So I think actually having it in front of the kids and showing them the actual food that is pollinated by bees and you know, and then take away, you know, have a whole range of food and then take away the things that are pollinated by bees, and what's left, there's actually not much left. You know, 65% of the food is bee pollinated. So you doing that really practical visual, because lots of kids, you know, they're visual, and so if they can see that, oh, we take all away now, what's left? Not a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have suggested. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Justine?
I know most of the preschools and kindergartens and even primary schools in around here all have, as I'm sure most of the preschools everywhere have, the little veggie gardens that they've all started. Here in the Illawarra, they called it sip and crunch and sip backwards. The kids were taken out at before morning tea, and they could pick some cherry tomatoes, and they could pick some lettuce out of the garden, and they were encouraging the canteens to actually use the vegetables that the kids actually grew as part of their in their little paper cups with their cotton wool buds, and they could plant anything from alfalfa to tomatoes to pumpkin or sunflowers. And then a lot of the primary schools were actually then selling that product at the canteen. So that's another way of getting hands in. And I was just saying to Bella before about how it's really fun to listen to you guys talking about preschool and whatnot. But it's such a shame that when the kids get to high school, it's just not cool anymore. So we live in Borrillo High School. They do one called the Green Team. They're trying to make it cool for the kids. And once they leave primary school, it's all fun and exciting, but they get to high school and it's not cool anymore to hang in the garden. So how do we? My question to you guys would be, how do we get it to the high school kids, because they're still part of it all, but they've got to be seen to be cool. So
I guess what we can do is definitely instill this passion. I think that's probably the only thing we can really do, because I mean, from my own experience in puberty, you just, you know, focused on some other things for a few years. But once it's instilled, I think this fire will be rekindled after puberty, the latest. If it had a bit of a rest during puberty, it will come back. I'm pretty sure that's what happened to me, at least. Yeah, exactly. All right, everyone, we have to come to an end. I would love to keep talking with you. There's so much more, but we will definitely provide everyone with a lot of different resources. I think everyone said some really valuable things today. I've rarely had such a great panel, so thank you so much for that. I am wrapping this up by just reminding everyone of our upcoming webinar. So we have another one on the 3rd of June. The topic is enriching early childhood with Indigenous knowledge. So a very important and interesting topic. I'm super excited about this one. You find some information on our website for that, and you can also book. We have one on the 16th of July, which is about bush tucker, and on the 16th of August, food for thought. So we'll talk about philosophical inquiry with children as part of the National Science Week topic, food different by design. And then there's another one each month until the end of the year, and there will be more next year. So these are only the next 3. So go on our website, have a look at what else is there for you to book. Also, don't forget that if you are a Little Scientist House, you get these webinars for free. So if you're not a Little Scientist House yet, you might want to consider that. Also go on our website and have a look at Little Scientist House. We also have a few face-to-face workshops coming up, so have a look at our website there too. I know that there is one coming up in Queensland, in Brisbane, on the 1st of June. It's an optics workshop. We also have on the 4th of June an air workshop in Perth, and on the 9th of June a workshop here in Narrabeen in New South Wales. That's chemical reactions. And we also have a bunch of workshops in Tasmania in June. So if you are in this area, great, please book. If not, we also have an online webinar coming up on the 9th, 10th and 13th of August. That's one webinar across 3 days, 1 hour each. And that is also a link to our National Science Week topic, Food Different by Design. So long story short, have a look at our website. Everything is on there. So thank you very, very much, everyone. And there's one last bee reference I have to make. Be kind to bees and everyone else. So thank you, and have a lovely day. Bye.